So at least I can use it for the bits and bobs. So welcome. Thank you for joining me. My name is Matt Nixon. This talk is for anyone interested in a little bit of adventure. Something we can't do a lot of at the moment, but I'm going to relive a 300-kilometre Husky Expedition that I did in 2018. So what the challenges were like, how I prepared, what I learned along the way, etc, etc. So hope it's some use. So before we get started, just a tiny bit of housekeeping. I'm recording it, hence why you can turn your video off if you like. Session will last about 50-55 minutes. There'll be an opportunity for questions at any time. I will try and answer them as I go along if I can, but I'll cover them at the end, no worries at all. So if you don't know how that works, bottom middle of the page or your screen, you should have a chat option. So click that, and then it should come up to that to work. I'm just going to someone's come on with 1 second. Mute that. There we go. Don't know what happened there. So where was I? So yes, please keep on the chat language clean because there's quite a few kids and obviously adults on the call today. So pop them in the chat box and I'll try and answer them as we can. So I sent a worksheet over a couple of days ago to those that logged on. Show you a quick look at it. Just a bit of fun. Add in some answers as you go, and a bit of a small prize to win at the end if you're up for doing that. So for those who've just joined, my name's Matt Nixon. I live in Stratford upon Avon in England with my 2 kids. Very keen to know where you guys are from. So in the chat, if you wouldn't mind popping a quick note in where you're listening from, that would be really interesting for me. And we'll just get started. So a few years ago, or over the last few years, there's a few moments in my life, if you like, that I believe have shaped the way I look at life. So they've resulted in me completing kind of marathons, ultra marathon, 100-mile ice skate in Mongolia down a frozen lake, which was a good one. And obviously what I'm talking about today as well. So today is the Husky Expedition. So one of these moments that happened to me over these years is my granddad. He used to say, it's not about the amount of breaths you take, it's what you do with them that counts. So for me, that's quite a strong message, and I'm just letting more people in. So that's quite a strong message for me. I do want the breaths that I take to count. And for the last few years, that's kind of one of the reasons why I've been taking on some of these personal challenges. It's an effort to kind of live a full life, if you like. And along the way, I've been filling in this book. So in this book, I write down things that I want to remember, things that I've had fun with, things that I'm proud of, basically. And to prove to myself, if I read it later on down the line, that I've led a full life. So that's the idea of this book. So my little black book. So the nature of these challenges that I take on, for me anyway, they're physically and mentally kind of tough. So you'll note that I use the words kind of for me. So everybody's different. I'm very normal, not special, not pretending to be Ant Middleton, Bear Grylls, Polar Explorers, or an athlete of any kind like that. Nothing like that at all. All I've done is decided to test myself, take on a challenge, try a few new things, and explore something a little bit less ordinary along the way. I mean, the true definition of the word challenge is a task or situation that tests someone's abilities. So no matter what level you're at with that. So this is partly where the title of today's talk comes from. So it's type 2, take 2. So for those that have heard it before, type 2 fun is fun you don't have at that time when you're having it. So type 1 fun is fun, ha, funny at that same time. Type 2 fun is fun that you have afterwards. So in a way, it's remember when kind of stories, if you like. And the take two bit is obviously having the opportunity to share this with you today. So I'm just going to share my screen to get a few pics up as I go. So I will keep flicking backwards and forwards between that. I hope you don't mind. I think it's worth you seeing a little bit more. So these are the challenges that I've done along the way. And that was where it began. So I chose to do this mainly because myself and our family on the right, you can see there on the screen, we visited Finland a few years ago. We did lots of activities there, but one of them was an hour's husky ride. So I drove half, and then Donna, my wife, she drove half at the same time afterwards. So it was an amazing experience. We was gliding across the snow, through all the forest and the trees, without a sound. It was just mesmerising, inspiring, relaxing, all at the same time, really. And when we got back from Finland, I found an expedition I liked the look of that included husky sled riding. But before securing my place, I called the organisers and asked two questions. First one was, do you go deep into the wilderness with this trip? And how remote is it, was the second. And so the answer I got to both questions was yes, very, for both, which is exactly what I wanted to hear. So shortly after, with a whole half an hour's worth of driving experience, I booked on to the session. So I was looking forward to it right from the beginning, something I'd never really done before. It may not surprise anybody else that the team due to go on the expedition were a lot of dog lovers. They all love dogs. So at this point, it's probably point out, I've never had a dog in our family, never really looked after a dog at all. My only real memory of dogs is actually from my paper round as a teenager. Walking down the road, had rolled up paper in my hand, coming down to the entrance of this big house, open the gate, walk down the thing, and massive Alsatian comes running towards me. So I turn, run in the opposite direction as quickly as I possibly could. And it follows me out the gate. So I had to turn around, whack it on the nose behind me. Thankfully, it doesn't cross over the road with me. But that was kind of my lasting memory of dogs, really, before this. Now, dogs are obviously quite an important part of the expedition. So you can kind of get a bit of a picture there. They're actually the dogs behind me. That was a picture I took when I was stood on the sled. They go through a lot. And they're an important part of the success of the trip, quite obviously. And these were Alaskan Huskies. So Alaskan Huskies are built for performance rather than looks. So you normally see on the TV Siberian Huskies. So they're obviously not like the Alaskan ones where they love running. Alaskan Huskies love running. And I have to manage 6 of these Huskies for 5 days and nights. So I was pretty concerned about this, but figured it'd all be all right. But there was actually, more to the point, more things I needed to worry about that I could control. Couldn't control the dogs at the moment, but I could control other things. So let's take that off. So when preparing for things like this, there's a list of questions that start building up in my head. So it might be kit related. It might be, how do I get picked up from the airport? Something as daft as that. It might be what the weather's going to be like. It might be how cold is it going to be? What's the camping in the snow going to be like? And if you're not careful, if all these little kind of questions get add up, and then you start seeing this kind of mountain grow up in front of you, and you start worrying about all sorts of stuff, which is really quite dangerous for your head. So what I do, write them down, start getting some answers to my questions, and then you can literally feel the anxiety kind of levels lower down right in front of you. So what highlighted doing this exercise for me is there was a few items that I was really quite concerned about, which was all temperature related. You can imagine in the Arctic Circle, still in March, which was the time of the trip, it's still really cold. So we're talking kind of -17, -24. I think it got actual degrees, but -40 it even went down to at one point with the wind chill. So the other thing is you can't really go in every day, anytime you want. You can't just go inside if you're cold. So quite obviously, if you're getting cold, that was something for me to try and avoid. So I did feel personally in a good physical shape at that time, a little bit better than I am at the moment, granted. But so that bit didn't really concern me, although when I got there, I kind of highly underestimated the amount of effort it would actually take to do it. But in this level of cold, actually managing your temperature and how active you get, how hot you get, are linked. If you can imagine, you're on a standing on the back of a sled, on the flat or downhill, you've got 6 dogs pulling you along. You can get very cold, especially if the wind's blowing. You're not doing anything. You just stood there, just reacting to the surroundings. But at the other half of it is that when you start going up hills, then the dogs actually need some help. So the sleds are full of kit, tents, stoves, dog food, your food, fuel. So you have to actually physically get off the sled and push it up the hill. And if you don't, the dogs let you know. They turn around and start shouting at you, or looking at you with a growl. But so by doing that, you do quickly become very hot. But if you do start sweating, that's not good, because the sweat can begin to freeze very, very quickly in those temperatures. You get cold real fast, and you start running into problems with hypothermia. So as you can imagine, with all these thoughts in my head, they start snowballing. So what I did, I try and look at it in 2 different ways. Is that I've tried to do it where I manage my worries, manage my anxiety. So one way I did it was in December, what you might have remembered, some of your really good memory, in 2017, we had a load of snow and it was forecast to be -13. So I thought, perfect. Got the tent out, back garden, slept out in there the night, and so I could test my kit, I could test base layers, I could test my sleeping bags, I could test all sorts. And if it got really bad, all I had to do was go in the house. For this one, the next thing I did, I booked on a place to a snow holing weekend in Norway, in Rjukan. And basically you strapped on some snowshoes, walked up a mountain, which was near Rjukan, dug a hole, which you can see in the inset picture there. That is actually a full bank of snow that later became where I'm lay at there. So that gave me a fantastic opportunity to test my kit, gloves, socks, hat, goggles, see what worked best. But more importantly, I ticked one massive tick in my anxiety box, which was I got to sleep in the snow in those conditions. So that really helped. And I actually helped to learn that my £16 bargain Amazon Swedish Army surplus waterproof mitts were far better than my proper expensive gloves. Who'd have thought it? But there we go. They're the kind of things that I managed to spot. So doing that, as I say, lowered my sense of anxiety quite a lot. 2 big ticks in the worry list gone, and I could get on with it. So with kit, those who've been on trips with me know that I struggle with minimizing what kit I take. I can't help it. I'm a bit of belt and braces. It's just the way things are. So what I tend to do now is actually I take as big a case as I possibly can with everything that I might want in there, take it to the location, and then when I can feel the temperature, when I can feel what the weather forecast, or what the weather's like physically, when I can feel what the weather forecast is going to be like, then I can start making some ultimate decisions. And then I'll end up leaving probably half the case in the hotel or the start point or whatever it might be. So once I'm happy, I can pack it all in. And for this particular trip, I ended up having to fit it all. You can't really see it very easy with the screen. Fit it all in a bag shaped like that, only pretty tiny for the whole week that we were going away. So the trip started in Tromsø, which is northern part of Norway. If you look behind me on the screen, you can see on the little white bit there, right at the top there, that's Tromsø. So when we got there, it was like kit explosion time all over again. everybody had kind of done a similar thing to what I'd done, and we had kit all over the place. Everyone's trying to sort out their own stuff. And it's just, it's time consuming, and you end up packing, repacking, unpacking, packing again and again and again and again. So the first night when we stayed somewhere, we stayed in, I think I showed you a brief snapshot of it just. We stayed in what they call a lavu, which is one of those. So it's basically a shed really, with a little tiny little stove in the middle, and you sleep around the edges of that shed for the night just before the trip started. So just after that, we got our kit. So we got issued our over coat, our trousers, and these huge boots. They were massive. They're absolutely brilliant. And they had some liners, so some silver liners that you could actually use to wear on your feet at night as well. So I'll talk about that just in a second. But for most of the time, when we were getting ready, all of a sudden there was a big shout, and everybody piled outside for that. And that was actually taken on the night, and we had a massive, huge kind of northern light storm, if you like, you want to call it a storm. And those of you who haven't seen Northern Lights before, it is truly mesmerizing. It's one of the biggest, most amazing kind of natural sights you can see on the planet. And it looks like light shining through water if you're underwater, or it looks like a swarm of birds all swarming around everywhere, all over the sky. It's just amazing. And this particular photo is obviously green and yellow. But then suddenly you'll get a bang and it'll be purple, like massive bits of purple everywhere as well. Just amazing. But what it proved more than anything was that it was a really, really good icebreaker for the group. We hadn't really met each other before. Basically it broke it down. As soon as we got there, it happened. This one thing everybody really wanted to see on their list happened straight away. So it relaxed everybody. Everybody was in a jovial mood. It was perfect start to the trip. So, as I said, it was a particular fantastic icebreaker. So I've got an icebreaker for you guys if you want to do it. You obviously don't have to, but it's summer here in the UK. And to get you all in the cold mood, I'll give you just a few seconds, just 20 seconds or so, where you can go and grab a cube of ice from the freezer, maybe a towel with it as well. So just literally a cube of ice. And all I want you to do is hold it in your hand, in your fist, as long as you like, and it'll start hurting pretty quickly afterwards. So I'll give you 20 seconds, quickly run and go and grab something of that, and then we'll carry on. I'll try and have a look through some questions while we're here. Wow, we've got some people from South Africa, from Italy, Slovakia, Milan, London, Germany, fab, Istanbul. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. So yeah, fantastic to know where you're from. From Bristol, thank you, Nick. Welcome. Right, if everybody's back, I don't know where they are or not, but it's hurting. I've been holding my ice cube for that length of time, and it's hurting my. Oh, it's cold in Cape Town right now. Sorry about that. Don't need the ice. Perfect. So yeah, it's hurting my hand right now. So all that was really meant to do is to get you in the mindset that you're going to be outside for a long time for this trip, and it hurts. If you get cold, it hurts. So the next morning, the start point we went to, which again was a bit of a surprise, because being honest, I kind of didn't really know what to expect, but we had met our sleds and our dogs. So the sled, as you can see there, is really pretty basic. You've got quite literally a wooden frame, and then a canvas bag with laces, just little bits of cord tied on to that wooden frame. And then all your kit went in the zip up bit there that you can see, and that was it. You had a brake at the back, which is like a curved bit of metal with some spikes on the bottom. You had an anchor, which I've added in there in the bottom right corner of the sled. You might be able to see big red anchor, which you basically throw it into the ground, but it's dangerous. It's really quite big and really sharp. But other than that, that's it. And then you can see the cable all wrapped around the front, that extended out, and then at intervals you had the dogs attached to it. So I had 6 dogs, other people had less, and some people had more. But before each day, as you can imagine, it was loud. So if you can see this video or hear this video, this actually wasn't right at the beginning, but just goes to show you just how loud these dogs are. There's about 100 dogs all there at the same time, and they don't like stopping. All they want to do is run. It's ridiculous. They're so fit and amazing dogs. Alaskan Huskies, remember. So before we started off, we had a briefing. So our last briefing, which everything else we were being left kind of by ourselves a lot of the time. So we got told what left, right, stop and go was in Norwegian, but then quickly got told there's absolutely no point in knowing that because they're not going to listen to you, which is number one. Second one, we were advised that after day 1, emotionally, we'd be at our lowest. So to expect some problems mentally after day 1, because the enormity of the whole thing would start to hit home. And then to top it off, we were also told that the first day we were heading up straight into the mountains on some mountain tight tracks. So that, I must say, all of it, those 3 things added into my mind all at the same time, I started widening, started getting a little bit worried about it. So, but then I was reminded that actually going uphill is actually not a bad thing when you're first learning how to do it, because if you go uphill, you're going slower. So you've got more chance to control what the sled's doing. Going fast when you don't know what you're doing is obviously not a great idea. But then when you saw some of the mountain passes we were going up, it becomes even more, the worry level starts going up more for me, and it did anyway. But every time someone fell off on these mountain passes, the snow was so deep, obviously the sleds go across it, whereas if you come off, you're straight up to your thighs, your waist even at some points, and getting back on and getting the sleds back up level is really pretty difficult, which was what happened next. We got up to the top of the hill the first day, and we heard a shout, "Loose sled," which is what you don't want to hear, especially if it's coming from behind you. And it, without being stating the obvious, this sled's coming up right behind me. Dogs are pelting straight down the line. The sled's coming at me. I didn't know what to do. Right at the last second, the dogs diverted. The sled wasn't going to, though, because obviously that's being pulled along. So I had a choice, and I decided to dive off my sled. So I dived off it. The sled behind crashed into mine. Both sleds went over. And then I was shouting "loose sled" as well. So a big eyes wide open at the beginning. After 100 yards, as the sleds are both on the side, the dogs kind of got the idea. It wasn't very easy to pull and gave up the ghost. But I had a bit of a narrow escape, really, right on day 1. I could have been pretty hurt. I suppose I could have parked the sled while I was waiting, but I hadn't. So I put someone else in danger at the same time. So, but it did widen everybody's eyes and figure out, right, this is actually for real. And if I hadn't have had that happen, I may have been a little bit more frivolous at another time where something really bad might have happened, which is obviously not going to be good. So having that happen early was good. Proudly, that's actually the only time I came off my sled. I don't get a chance to say that very often, but I'm very proud about that fact. I think everybody else did come off, but I managed to stay on. So, but using this park brake and anchor that we talked about, the things are big. So if you land on that, or that lands on you and it pulls, it's going to hurt. So when you park, you should park your sled whenever you can. Throw it into the ground, you stamp it in, and then you can see on the picture there that I've left up that it actually lays across the rope and lays across the anchor. Sorry, you can't see that. It's on the shared screen picture of mine. But that's the idea. More to the point, I was really, really pleased with my kit choice. So I chose a short sleeve, sure you don't really need to see these, but short sleeve thermal top, just standard one, a long sleeve base layer merino wool, a short sleeve wind stopper kind of gilet, again just basic really, a thick fleece, a big long sleeve thick fleece, and then obviously on my head I had a wind stopper hat, and with the hands I had thin liner gloves and then some mitts that I talked about earlier, my Swedish special mitts, which were these 16 quid, bargain. They're absolutely brilliant though, really, really good. So with all these layers, I could control all my layers, or control my temperature, sorry, with using these layers whenever I wanted. So if I was hot, obviously I could zip everything down. If I was cold, I could zip everything up, and I had this massive hood I could put on as well. But I knew with these gloves, I was going to be taking, you have to consider everything on this sled, where I was going to be having to use my hands quite a lot because the dogs got tangled up, needed to get access to things. So I was going to tie a rope, you know, like the old kids thing, down your sleeves, out your thing, put your mitts on, you know, but I chose against that. I actually went for some of these. If you can see, try and work out the mirror effect. So basically that goes over your wrist, and then your hand goes in the mitt, and then you can just drop it off and you're not going to drop it. So that for me was a sensible thing to do. The only other thing, there's two things I could drop. I'll talk about one a bit later, but the other one was the flask. So I did tie my flask to the sled. This particular one got a little bit of a hole there and a trigger effect. So all I kept in these was water, and you got a trigger, so all I kept to do was drink and put it back in the pocket, so I knew I wasn't going to drop it. I did have another flask, a bigger one, so whenever we did stop, which actually wasn't very often, I could just top that up with my other flask, just with hot water, nothing else in there. It didn't really matter if the water was hot or cold when I actually got to it. As long as it wasn't frozen, that's all I was after. So that's all the flasks were really there for, so the water didn't freeze. Other than that, all day on the sled, we were there for 75 kilometers or so each day, and all I had was a pack of cookies. So just lovely big packs of Maryland cookies, one in my big pocket in my big Parker jacket, and then I could munch on them if I was hungry through the day, nice and easy. If I'd have taken like a Mars bar or dairy milk or something like that, then quite obviously they could have broken my teeth and my jaw would have been in all sorts of bother. But drinking was really important. So that's why I wanted something where with a trigger on it that wasn't going to leak, that I could have exactly when I wanted it to keep topped up. Because if you get cold, then you're actually probably thirsty. So you have to keep hydrated. And it's very, very easy when you're concentrating for that length of time to be thirsty or stay thirsty. So constant hydration as you're going along. But actually, I must have done it all right at it, I suppose, because I didn't feel cold, actually, for the whole length of the thing when I was on the sled. But if I was hot, I did have the option, like I say, of undoing the layers. If I was cold, I could do it all back up. But the old Inuit saying was one where if you're cold, put your hat on. If your feet are cold, put your hat on, and the opposite way around. So if you take your hat off, gloves off, you can manage your temperature really, really effectively just by doing those couple of things. Obviously, the more you drink, the more you're going to need to visit the toilet. On these particular places, there obviously aren't toilets. So being a man, I got lucky a little bit, I suppose, with this. But you did have to bide your time for the right point in moment where it was nice and flat, and you weren't going to have to hold on as tight to the sled. And you could go just about without anybody knowing. Or they didn't tell me they saw me anyway. But there we go. That's another about that one. So on the sled, first day, eventually we turn up at Camp 1. So, sorry, just snip past these ones. So at Camp 1, this is what it's like going along. Just turn the volume off. So heading along on this kind of journey, that's kind of what you see a lot of. just a lot of nothing. The wind obviously playing havoc, and the dogs, you can see even on the flat bit there, I suppose you are going uphill a little bit, they're struggling a little bit pulling that. So I'm just trying to move to the next slide. There, so we're at now at Camp 1, what they call the Tri-Nation border. So each one of those stones on the, they've actually got a little monument there that's actually sat in a lake, although it's frozen obviously at the minute, so you can't see it. But you've got Sumi, which is, I think, Sweden, excuse me if I don't know that. And then you've got, on the other side, you've got Finland, sorry, Norway, and the other hand side to that, you've got Finland. So that marks the triangular point of the Tri-Nation border. So after we parked our sled, that becomes a whole heap of more stuff to do. There's loads going on as soon as you have to park up. You have to go through the ordeal, first of all, of getting your dogs off the sled and onto a night line, secure night line, so they don't run away. You have to take the harnesses off. You have to put their night coat on, and they've actually all got different sizes of night coats. You can imagine what that is. Remember, I don't do dogs. I haven't got a clue about dogs. So this was actually really difficult for me to do. I don't know how they're going to react. I don't know if their leg likes going in that position or not. Thankfully, they're pretty good. They're really good with me. And they must have known I was hopeless at it, for all I know. But it got really cold really quick, especially in the deep snow. And trying to manage carrying or pulling these 3 dogs across the ground to get to this particular place was really, really tough. But the dogs are strong, no doubt about it. And they got in a tangled mess, whatever. But, you know, as long as the line remained taut, because if you imagine you've got the sled, you've got your 6 dogs in 3 bits. So you take them off nearest the sled first and work your way forward so that line stays taut throughout the whole thing. Otherwise, you get in a complete mess. And then in the morning, you have to remember which dogs went where to go back, so in reverse order. But the important thing to do when you're doing that is give the dogs loads of fuss. They're obviously your engine. They don't know you. They didn't know me at all. Obviously, I hadn't met them at all, even when I got on the sled. So they got a good chance if you give them a big cuddle or messing with their hair or whatever, then stroking them, then give them a bit of food, then they're actually going to do, that's going to do a lot. It's going to do a lot for them when they're actually, on the next morning, they're going to realize, oh, there's Matt, there's my driver, he's nice to me, so I'm going to run better for him. That's apparently what they're like. But they are absolutely amazing dogs. So my dogs were called, just share this with you, got a quick video. So that is Silver. That is actually Ling, which is Silver's mum. That's Apple. And that is Aurora. They're both sisters. And then you've got Panther. You can see that one's a bit bigger. And then the most Norwegian name of all, Dave. So there we go. Dave the Husky. And he was a bit of a legend, I have to tell you. And there we go. I felt lucky, really lucky with my tent mate as well. I had a tent mate called Charlie, and he was ex-army. So we both managed to get on quickly with all of our camp jobs. They're the tents, so we got them up really quick, collected water from the water source, got the stove on super quick every day. And then we'd actually be in a position where we could help others. So helping others on this trip was quite a big thing, because you might need help the next second as well. You might fall off. So it was a real big team effort. You can see there with the tents, they're pretty standard geodesic tents. So basically you've got a couple of poles that hold the whole tent up. Excuse my videography on this one. So the geodesic tents hold it in a dome, and all they've really got different to a normal tent. We didn't use any of the guy ropes, but we did use, they had a snow skirt on them. So I'll just rewind it just briefly here. So they had a snow skirt on it, which you could bury the skirt of the tent all around it. We had some big V-shaped tent poles, pegs, sorry, that went in. And then you can see what we've had to do. What I do enjoy is learning about how people do things in different environments. So in the tent, in the porch area, those of you that camped before, you can see I've kind of dug there a ditch. There's a bit of a stick sticking out of it, or a bush sticking out of it. You can kind of get the idea. So in the porch, we've dug a ditch across. And so the tent area to your right is actually the sleeping quarters. And then on the left is your kitchen. So that allowed you to actually sit down and cook. So you sat on your sleeping area, and then you're cooking on the floor, if you like, in front of you, like a table. So doing things like that, I love it, how you actually have to change the way you do stuff. The food we actually had was kind of in these rehydration packages, which I actually really, really liked. We had all sorts of different flavours, chili, curry, whatnot. But the snow at all these different places was different, very, very different everywhere. Some it was like sleeping on a bean bag, you know, like polystyrene beans in the bag. Some it was rock hard, absolutely rock hard, so pretty uncomfortable. And somewhere in the middle, your Goldilocks snow, if you like, was just right. So the Icelandic think they've got 50 names, or 50 words, sorry, for snow. And the Norwegians reckon they've got 100, but you can kind of see what they mean after a bit, because you can tell the difference, you can feel the difference, you can even hear the difference as you're going along. But actually, when we were there, we didn't get any snow, physical snow at all. It did blow around a lot and make it look like it's snowing, but it didn't. And one of the things that you could notice a lot of was how lost train of thought, was how clean everything was. There wasn't any dirt anywhere. So on the bottom of your feet, on everywhere, it was just spotless, because you just got snow, perfect snow everywhere. There was nothing. It was amazing. And that was a surprise to me for some reason. So once we'd set up all this, to get cooking on anything, so this is drinks and food, first thing you've got to do is go and get water. So hopefully someone had gone to the lake or the river and dug or smashed a hole in the ice so we could gather the water. So we literally just took all our bottles down there and the cooking pot, loaded it all up, and used the stove that you could see in the video there. Took quite a lot of tweaking and adjusting, and some people did have some big flare-ups, and we did as well, I think, on ours. So I wouldn't normally suggest that using one of these stoves inside a tent is a good idea. In fact, it's probably not. It's probably one of the worst ideas you could have. But what I did do is make sure the door was at least half zipped or all the way zipped up, so we could get out if there was a problem. But don't do that at home, I must say. Also, if you do cook for too long, then the water in the pot, although it might add heat to the tent, is actually going to make steam, and steam in that temperature at that night, it would just freeze to the tent. So in the wall of the tent, you've actually ended up with a load of snow. So every time you might touch the tent inside, you'll get a snowfall on you. Even with your breath through the night, you're going to get that happen. But the food we had was really, really good. And anything would taste good, I suppose, on these particular things. But I fell into a bit of a rhythm pretty quick. I had like a noodle starter, like a pot noodle kind of starter, and then had one of those ration packs. But like I say, it was good. I wouldn't complain at all. But it is worth bearing in mind how quickly things freeze. It's ridiculous. As soon as you take your hands off and say, for example, if I was to hold that stove bottle, my fingers, because it's metal and anything metal, your hands are going to start sticking to it. And that's why the sleds are made out of wood, so your hands don't stick to that. And that's painful, obviously, if you get that. We obviously had hot chocolate, coffee. Thank God we had coffee, by the way, in the morning. But what camp did do for me is it highlighted the dead time, I call it, for one of these trips. So the dead time for me is when you get a chance to think about things too much. So people's moods change really quick, because the actual doing things, you're busy and you're doing what you're there to do. And then as soon as you switch off, that becomes difficult. For me, I was feeling pretty accomplished. So the way I'd break it down, I'd looked at it as 5 days. So I'd done a fifth of it already. I'd completed it, if you like, in gamer speak. And after another one of those days tomorrow, in my head, I was nearly halfway there. So I was feeling all right. But others weren't. Like one particular guy was pretty distraught. He was saying things, I can't believe we've got to put up our own tents. I can't believe we've got to fetch our own water from the thing. I can't believe we've got to deal with our own dogs. This is ridiculous. They could at least help us and all this kind of stuff. And quite obviously, he hadn't read the small print of the dossier they sent out. But I was pretty surprised. And he was so vocal that I actually thought he was joking. But he wasn't. You know, he'd had all these things happen, and in his head, he couldn't get out of it. And he had had all these things hit him mentally, that he started seeing that mountain, like I spoke about earlier, started seeing all these problems flash up in front of him. And he just pushed it all away. He didn't want to know. He'd switched off. He was going home. He'd wanted out. He wanted a snowmobile to take him away. So we obviously helped him with his dogs, with his camp set up. We chatted to him, tried to reassure him, reminded he was doing it for charity. He'd earned a lot of money for charity at that point already. And then we reminded him, maybe try and speak to your wife. And that might sound weird, but remarkably, we did have a phone signal for a lot of the journey, the majority of the journey. So if I had a signal, once we got to camp, you couldn't do it on the sled, obviously, but I'd ring the family before I got to bed. So the one night, I had a signal enough to actually have a FaceTime video call with the family. So at the time, my youngest kid, Freddie, he was 6 years old, I think, and maybe even 5. So I got out the tent to show the kids the dogs on the video, and Freddie saw the dogs and howled. As you can imagine, there was 100 or so dogs howled back, like they've on that video I showed you before, but worse. Just as everybody's trying to have a bit of quiet time, I was not very popular. But it was funny nevertheless. But I'm not 100% sure if anybody knew quite how it happened. I think they probably thought I prodded one of them or something, one of the dogs. But yeah, after that point in time, with that dead time, everybody ended up going back to their tents quite quick, because it was -24 we had in the daytime. One night, -17 very regularly, with the wind chill as well. It would add on at least 10 to that, no problems at all. So you don't really want to hang around. Because if you get cold before you go to bed, it's not good, because your body heats up the sleeping bag. Your sleeping bag doesn't warm up you. You have to warm up the air inside the bag. So I had a winter bag that I had given to me, a Mammoth one, a winter bag that had a comfort rating of -17. So it's right on the limit of that comfort. As I said, I didn't say, I had a fleece liner I took with me as well. So that bumped up the comfort rating a little bit. But on top of that, the big thing about camping in the cold is that actually the floor you need to insulate from almost more than the air. Because if you start camping on the floor on ice, which is effectively what we were doing, then the cold from that is going to permeate up through your sleeping bag and you really quickly. So we had a thick foam roller we put down the floor, and we had like a self-inflate thermarest that we ended up having to blow up because it was so frozen solid anyway. But obviously through this time, you can't really get changed. Sorry to tell you that, but I changed my underwear once as a midweek treat, but everything else just kept on because it just wasn't any point. It was just cold, and you didn't really want to expose yourself to that cold. And at night, I ended up wearing wearing stuff that was like a liner. I think someone's trying to ask a question. I'll take questions at the end. I think it might be Christina. I'll take some questions at the end if that's okay. So yes. we had to wear all that stuff in the sleeping bag, but not too much, because again, your body warms it up. So if you wear too many insulating layers, then your sleeping bag actually doesn't warm up. But the one thing that really hurt for me was the inside of my nose, because if you imagine, most sleeping bags they've got like a really small opening, and I actually had it as tight as I could possibly pull it. So you pull it tight as you can, like that. So literally your nose and your eyes and your mouth are kind of poking out. Because if that goes in your sleeping bag, you end up putting loads more condensation in your bag as well, in the actual sleeping bag, which obviously becomes ice in there eventually. So, but when you had your nose out of the sleeping bag, it burned it. The inside of your nose just scabbed, and it was horrible. So that really wasn't a good thing. So I did, on really cold nights, I did end up completely in the bag. I'm running a tiny bit behind, but I think we started a little bit late, so I hope everybody's good with that. But my one worry as well, another worry, we've got lots of them, was getting wet when you actually lie on the snow. In my head, I wasn't sure if you lay on the snow at night, would the snow melt? So would you get wet? But as I said before, everything froze. Absolutely no chance of having that happen, because with minus 24 degrees, everything quickly turned into that. Now that was the pot. The next morning, I literally picked the lid off the pot and the whole chunk of ice was frozen solid and came out like that. So at least my question was answered about what happens to that at night. So with that happening, you might think there's no point going at night, refilling everything in the water. But that was absolutely the thing to do, because the last thing I'd want to do is wake up in the morning and have to traipse quite a long way sometimes down to the water source to actually gather the water to be able to start getting the coffee on or your breakfast, because breakfast was oats with like powder milk and some nuts and stuff. So you couldn't do anything until you got water. So we chose to get all of that in the pot, frozen or not, and then boil it down the next morning. So with the cold at night, it gets everywhere. If you don't cover something, it gets ice on it. There's just no other way to describe it. It's like leaving it outside. It just freezes. So you've got to try and cover up your clothes that you want to put on, your over trousers and your jacket and your boots, more importantly. Cover them up in such a way so they don't get ice in them. Outside of them is not so much of a problem. I mean, obviously putting on cold shoes is really horrible. So I mentioned earlier, with these boots that we had these silver, pretty fancy kind of 80s pop star kind of boots that actually go inside the big snow boots, which were kind of a bit like that, but loads bigger than that one. And that actually, what I used there was I took them out of the boot, put a hand warmer inside, and so my feet were toasty all night, no problems at all, because my feet were cold, my feet were warm, everything else was warm. And then when I actually put my feet that were still in these silver things in the boot in the morning, I couldn't really feel how bad the boot was. So that was a little trick that I used to use. But if you do get cold in your sleeping bag, there are a way around it. You can do sit-ups or get moving a little bit or eat something fatty, like butter or oil or something like that. Add oil to everything, and then you kind of get more fat and you keep the bag warmer. So on the whole, though, I slept really well most nights. I really quite enjoyed it, which might come as a bit of surprise. And I was first up every morning because I slept so well, probably. I was first up, which had its bonuses, because the morning rituals, which I don't want to talk about toilet stuff twice in a thing, but I am anyway. You obviously had to go somewhere in the location of the camp. Now, a lot of the time we had a hill or a mountain or a tree or a forest or something we could wander into with our snowshoes on. And we ended up having the best view from the loo every morning. Took a bit of getting your head around, but had to be done. And then the other thing that was very different, absolutely no point in taking toothpaste, because toothpaste would freeze solid. Couldn't get it out of the tube at all. So a little bit of mouthwash, not the actual one I took, obviously, but a little bit of mouthwash, and then you can brush your teeth and happy days, all sorted. But the dogs in the morning, as soon as you got up, they knew what was happening. They knew they were going for a run, and they just got noisier and noisier and noisier. And you can imagine moving them from the night line to the sled line was even worse in the morning, because they're just all over the place. They're jumping up, they're happy, they want to go. It's just ridiculous how much energy they've got. Excuse me. But someone else that actually woke up in a good mood was the guy that actually was really demotivated the day before, which was amazing, because he had managed to speak to his wife, and he'd got it round it in his head. He'd managed to detach himself, if you like, from the challenge. It was just something he was doing at that point in time. It wasn't him, wasn't owning him. The challenge was just there. He was just doing it, going along, and he started to see the mountain, if you like, from above, like a map, rather than on the ground, like right in front of you, like I've said a couple of times. So this actually was a massive relief to the whole group, because we all thought he'd be wanted to go home. So this person obviously was a bit on an emotional roller coaster, like we should say, and but this mood could change the feeling in the camp as well. And obviously, being the same person, I found was quite interesting. But it just goes to show that when we're doing these kind of things, it does start to become type 2 fun territory. So I said at the beginning, type 2 fun is fun that's not fun at the time, but type 1 fun is fun that you can laugh about when you're doing it. But I always think, what if I'm feeling low, which everybody does on these things, you know, I'm not immune to it at all. I'm, like I said before, I'm a normal person. If I feel, I say to myself, right, if I was going to give up now, how would I feel tomorrow? So that for me is never a positive answer in my head. I've never got a positive version of that. And then I'll think, right, how will I feel at the finish line? So when I've passed the finish line, I've got to my destination, how am I going to feel? And then I always get a positive feeling, almost like a tingly feeling inside. So that is normally enough to get me back in the game and back out there. So as I touched on earlier, really, the challenge, switching thing, within defined, I looked at it as defined segments. So each days were very different, which actually helped me. It helped me visualize it. We had like a mountain day, a lake day, a wood day, and then this day going up to what's called fish camp. So it helped me to mentally visualize the breakdown of it. And on fish camp, you can see there's some little huts. So again, on the third night, we were staying in one of these rather than camping. So then mentally, I was hanging on to that for a little bit of light relief from the cold. Really, really remote. You can only get there in the winter by sled and a helicopter, or skidoo, obviously. But in the summer, I was told you can only really get there by helicopter. So it's a pretty bleak and open place. And there it got down to -40. And opening the doors, you can see one of the doors there on the hut. When you opened the door, it was like something out of a cartoon. It was ridiculous. It was like going through a space airlock or something. You just get steam, like both ends, like outside and inside. You'd open it, it'd be like, and you'd get all the steam everywhere. It was quite funny to see. And also that night, we had our third night in a row of Northern Lights. As I said, we couldn't really make the most of it because staying outside wasn't a good idea, but here we had windows where we could kind of look out for them. But again, in the middle of nowhere, no light pollution at all. It was pretty amazing again. But we started to get our own water from the lake that was actually behind that hut, a massive lake. It took quite a bit of time to get there, and still no ensuite. So there we go. That's what we had to deal with. But the weather changed overnight at this place. It went from blue skies to blow in a hoolie, and you can see there that picking up all of the snow, blowing it all around the place, all over the place, which made it really difficult. And I started on the sled that particular day to start getting a little bit worried. You couldn't really see anything. You're going along and you know you're going downhill, you know you're on a mountain somewhere, and going downhill on this when you can't really see what's in front of you is pretty hair-raising. I've switched the sound off on this one, or I thought I had. There we go, because it's pretty windy, this one. So you can see there that the bag there, that the kit bag that we've got attached to the sled, is actually turned into a bit of a sail. So it's actually pushing me, it's pushing the dogs, and they're struggling really pretty hard to get out in front, to get ahead. And that's what it was like for a few hours. And it got worse where, I mean, obviously I'm using my camera there, so obviously didn't feel that bad at that point. You can see the brake there, the red, really heavy, dangerous thing. So as you get going, and it just missed a sign as well, but you almost got to stand on the one rail of the sled and physically hold the sled with all your weight against the wind so it didn't blow over. And you're trying to skid it almost straight the whole time. I suppose like flying a plane in the wind. And then we eventually got down to that lake that I just showed then. Apologies, I just stopped it a bit early. So we got onto these lakes. So after all the mountain passes, we got down there, and I said before that I had my gloves attached to me. Well, I had one run-in with the guy that the expedition leader. His name was PT. He was a full-on polar explorer. Obviously does this all the time. Ex-Norwegian Special Forces, absolutely hard as nails. You didn't mess with him, basically. So these gloves I had, we had the loop on them. I was using my phone, obviously, because it was nice and flat. Didn't realise it fell out my coat. So I thought I put it in my pocket. It fell out. We stopped for a break for something to drink. I found the phone was missing. So I plucked up the courage to go and ask PT about my phone. So I walked up there pretty sheepishly, told him what happened. And he replied, well, go back down the line, because obviously, as you can see on the picture there before, there was a few people dotted in the line. So you go back down the line, ask if they've got it. If not, we'll go back for it. I was amazed. I just presumed it was gone. It was luck, just complete luck that he chose to do that. But it just goes to show how if you make your worries known, then people can either deal with them or at least you've shared your worry with somebody. So I try to make it clear that I'm a scout leader at home as well in Stratford and Shottery. And whenever we go on a camp or a hike, I try and say quite regularly to the guys how important it is to share their worries, because it could be something absolutely ridiculously minor. It could be, I don't know, they've forgotten their sleeping bag. So maybe at 2 o'clock on a scout trip, you can sort that, you can get them a sleeping bag. But at 9 o'clock at night, when they only just tell you, they might not, you can't. So I always say worry shared is half the worry straight away. So I thought my phone had long gone, but long story short, I walked down the line and one of his assistants had picked it up. I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely happy as Larry. So the next couple of days, there was a few hair-rays in a sense, as I said, down some mountains and forests. We started to have some fun though. Some of us actually held back on the top of the hills to go faster down the hills and have some fun racing down them. So obviously if you put your brakes on, remember the dogs are going to let you know, so you weren't very popular, but it was a lot more fun. But obviously with that, that's where accidents started to happen. People got complacent. We pushed the speed a bit more, maybe concentration, tiredness all added in. But we became better and quicker at using the anchors. So when the problem did happen, we could get the anchors in, park our sled and stand there big so the dogs would stop. So that once the dogs would stop, it was the sled you just needed to watch out for. But when you grabbed them, you were fine, and more people got more to it. But the sleds did become harder to control as well as the time went on, because you got less food, less fuel, less dog food in there as well. So the lighter the sled, the dogs are going to be able to pull it easier. So some people actually struggled to break it. So concentration was difficult on these lakes because it's such an open expanse. And right at the end of the session, the expedition, we got all that for hours on end. And it did kind of get a little bit boring after the adrenaline we'd had over the last few days. But then we got to the ice hotel. That was our finish point, the ice hotel in Jukkasjärvi, right on the lake. And all of their rooms are made to look like something like that. And they've got a church there as well, which that person there is walking down towards the church. And that is completely made out of ice, obviously. They get designers in from all over the world. And we did have a tour, but we ended up in the bar, as you can see on the right-hand side, with some reindeer chips and some cocktails. So that was the end of the challenge or the expedition. So I travelled to Norway, done a 300-kilometre expedition, camped out in a freezer, handled my team of 6 dogs for the week. From not knowing anybody there at the trip, we built a team really quick, and we got back to civilization, if you like. And after all of that, I got this medal. So quite obviously, I didn't do it for that. I didn't do it for the medal, obviously. But these challenges give me so much energy as we go along. Like after I come back from something, you can't shut me up. Just talking about what's happened, and I want to share it with people like I am now. But on the way, I'd raised money for charity. I'd taken on a challenge that I had no idea how to do before I went. I'd used a good few of those full breaths from my granddad. I'd learned some new skills. I knew more about myself, mentally and physically, and it's something I remember for the rest of my life. So it's experience that is definitely in my black book that I talked about at the beginning. So I'd like to open it up to any questions if anybody's got any. Obviously appreciate if anybody's got a go. I would love to get some feedback on this. If you could type anything you want into the chat there, or send me a message by email. This is actually one of a few talks that I can do. All of these little challenges build up into a main keynote kind of speech, which is builds all of it together, all my things I've learned along the way. So if anybody's interested in hearing more about that, then please let me know. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, I'm a bit conscious because there's so many of you on to actually put everybody on unmute, but maybe type in to the chat any questions you might have for me. And if you haven't done already, I'd love to know where you're from or where you're listening from in the chat, if you could type that in. And failing that, if you wish to depart, quiz. Has anybody got the quiz, the answers to the handout I did? If no one has, don't have to do it now. This is going to be, it is recorded. I'm going to put it on a YouTube thing so you can read it in again. There's one word I'm looking for the answer to that handout. Again, you can email or message me afterwards, and there's a little tiny prize for that. So we've got, what charity did I raise funds for? So I raised funds for this particular one. I've done a few different charities over the years, but this one was the Institute of Cancer Research. So I self-funded it completely, the trip.
Sponsorship.
So I did it for that charity. Anybody else got... Louise, what's the next challenge? So I've got loads in a list. Donna, my wife, knows, I think she knows anyway, she does know. I've got loads on a list. I've got all sorts of stuff that I'd want to do. They go from a little bit crazy to fairly normal. Crazy ones might be, I'd love to cycle around Iceland. There's a ring road that goes all the way around Iceland. I'd love to cycle that. In Denmark, there's a stretch of water that goes across a peninsula that like cuts through the middle of Denmark almost. I'd love to kayak or something across that. I've got other things going on for actually, I don't know whether it actually happened, but a world record attempt on something that I'm not organising, but I've been asked to partake in. I'm just waiting for any news on that. So what else have we got? We've got practicing in your back garden sufficient for cold nights in the snow from Valeria. Yeah, I think it was. For me, it was more mental. I mentally thought I was going to get cold. I mean, I do sleep a little bit cold anyway, so I managed that by I had a sleeping bag that was rated to -17, comfort rating, that is, not extreme rating, because comfort rating is the one you want to look at. I put a fleece liner in. I was wearing my base layers. I knew I was going to wear a hat as well, and I could take it off. I knew it was only for a certain amount of time. I knew if there was a problem, then someone would be around to help if it was bad. I had that kind of backup. But for me, it was more mental that I thought I was going to struggle with it, and I didn't. I actually quite enjoyed it. But if it was any less than -13, it was like 0 degrees or something, there probably wasn't a lot of point in doing it. But Norway, really, the snow holing was where I really kind of hit home that, yeah, that's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. Was practicing, I got that one. I'm a dog person now. So I'd have to say I probably am. I loved them. They were brilliant. Our experience in Finland before we went of Huskies was actually quite. It was actually quite. They were really. They sounded really angry. You know, the dogs that we had when they barked, they sounded excited. If that sounds really ridiculous, but they sounded angry and they were biting each other and all sorts in Finland. And I was a bit worried about the kind of temperament of them. So I did stay well clear of the dogs until actually after day one, when they said, look, you need to get in there and tell them, well done and thanks very much. And then they'll know it for the next morning. And they were absolutely brilliant. They were so friendly. They just come and sniff and bark, and they'd always come over for a bit of a cuddle or something. And all they did at night, they just curled round literally in a ball where they were and slept in the snow. In the morning, they'd have a great big snow cave almost of their own, where they'd melted down into the snow. Absolutely amazing dogs. But not sure if I'd get one. Got too much responsibility, I think. Is it possible to receive a recording of this amazing presentation? Thank you very much, Alessandro. It's very kind. But yes, when I press stop recording, it'll save it, and I'm going to put it on our YouTube channel. So I'll circulate the link with that to all the attendees afterwards. Did you meet other people along your route, or is it absolutely depopulated? Arena from Italy. It was really, you didn't really see anybody at all the first bit. We were going up into the mountains, and you didn't really see anyone. The only one person we did see at fish camp actually was an actual Sami. Sami are the native people around there, and he had, I think, a team of like 10 dogs, a bigger sled, and he was towing a sled as well. So he was towing a thing behind him, which he had all the kit, and obviously he was wearing all the furs and all that kind of stuff. But other than him, I actually got a photo of him somewhere, but I didn't put it in the presentation. But so yeah, other than that though, until you got back down the mountain onto the lakes, you started, as you got nearer to Kiruna or near to Jukkasjärvi, where the ice hotel is, there was a lot of Norwegians, well, I presume they're Norwegians or local people, that were skiing on the lake. So the lake had quite a bit of snow on it. It wasn't ice like in Mongolia when I did a trip over there. It was all ice pretty much, like sheet ice. But this had snow on, and there was a lot of people pulling polkas. So a polka is like a sledge basically that you just pull behind you. So there was quite a few people the nearer you got there. And then as you gradually went down the lake, you could see little lake huts patched down, and that got more and more gradual the closer you got there. But there was markers, so that must be a known trail, although there wasn't any sign of that. And actually each country marked the trail differently. So I think I'm probably going to get this wrong now, but I think in Sweden they mark it with just a stick, so literally a stick out the snow. But in Finland, in Norway, our leader PT say that the Norwegians do it properly. We mark it with a cross, so they had the proper cross ones in their position. But yeah, you didn't really see anybody. Thank you. So very interesting. Well delivered. Thank you very much. Next, what kind of food do the dogs eat? How often do they rest, stop to drink or rest? So the dogs, we stopped once a day. So they did 75 kilometers-ish a day. We stopped once properly where everybody's on the flat, everybody's safe. And they got fed literally a scoop of dried dog food in the day. And then, as daft as it sounds, they drank as they went along. As we went along in the snow, they'd kind of turn their head, move the other dog over with them a little bit and bite the snow. And the snow obviously was their drink. And that's what they used to do, should eat the snow as we went along. When we got to camp, they had more food. They had the dried food as well, and a little bit of luncheon meat, I think. But again, the drink-wise, they just ate the snow. There's no point leaving them a bowl of water because it would just freeze. And do all 6 dogs in your team always work together? Always? No, they don't. The dogs sometimes mix with other teams. I think what they'd done on this trip is that they'd given dogs who know they work together. So the 2 sisters I had in the middle, Aurora and Apple, you might remember their names, they did fight a little bit or nitpick a little bit at each other. And the 2 dogs at the back were like the workhorses, and the 2 dogs at the front were like the ones that knew where they were going, mum and son. So they kind of got on with it, but they did have a bit of a nitpick, especially when if they bumped into another group. So if you bumped into the ones at front, it was very rare you overtake anybody. But when it bumped into them, then they had more fights against the other team, if that makes any sense. But largely they were pretty good. As I said, whenever you put the foot on the brake, you knew about it, that's for sure. Was there any women in the group? Yes, there was. There was 4 women, I think. 2 of them knew each other before they got there. One lady was, I'm going to guess, maybe 60-ish. And she actually, she was recovering from chemotherapy, so she did an amazing job. She actually didn't manage to do the whole thing. She did miss a little bit of it because she was just too tired. But yeah, amazing that she actually gave it a go. She was one of the ones that really, really loved dogs as well. So she got a lot from it. She actually wanted to stop more so she could have a look, be with the dogs. How much can a Siberian Husky pull? I have to say, I don't really need. Oh, how long? How many consecutive hours? I mean, we did 75 kilometers. I couldn't tell you how long it was, but we started first thing, like 8-9 o'clock in the morning. And we were, depending on the route, obviously, because up the mountains, you might not go very far. For example, after the night 2 to the top of Fish Camp, you're basically going up a mountain most of the day and then skirting round a big lake to get down to it. So there wasn't really a lot of distance. I mean, you can probably see that on the little map behind me, that day 4 really was the longest distance we went because it was all flat. A lot of it was lakes. But I would have to guess maybe 7 hours, 8 hours. It was a long time. I mean, they're not going quick a lot of the time anyway, especially up the hills, like I say. Hope to listen to your next challenge. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've got plans for more. Got one about a Mongolia ice skating one, Mount Tubkal in Morocco. A couple of people went with me on that one that I know, so I'm going to try and get them involved with it as well. Listening today, I think one of them is Simon Clark, and Chip might be as well, Chiprian. But yeah, that was a good trip. And the Mongolia one, I did a 100-mile ice skate down a frozen lake, so that was a bit of a killer. and I can try and do that talk in a few weeks' time. Can you speak about the expenses on the trip and on the charity for this? Is it an annual event? The company I did it with, depending on if you do it for charity or not, or if it's self-funding or not, can make a difference to how much it is with a lot of these challenges. It's pretty full on, but if you're doing it, if you choose to self-fund it, then I wanted to do it that way. I wanted to self-fund it, and it's all inclusive when you do that. So all of the flight, hotel after the trip, hotel before it, well, the lavoo before it, all the food when you're there, all the drink, and it works out. I don't know what the price is now because it's a couple of years ago, but it wasn't cheap. But I'd prefer to know that all of the money that I raise was going towards the charity direct. So I actually did the charity bit separate. If you actually physically tell them you wanted to do it for charity, you would pay a different price, which was lower, but you'd have to raise far more money for charity, which I felt at the time was more pressure than I kind of wanted at that point. And I didn't know of that value of how much I earned for charity, how much of it would exactly go to the charity at hand. So I preferred to do it direct. But outside of the trip completely, Norway's not a cheap place. Scandinavia in general, like Finland, Norway, Sweden, anyway, isn't very cheap. A round of drinks afterwards was pretty expensive, I have to say, but amazing place. I definitely want to go back there very, very soon and do it again. And it is an annual event, and we actually did the first week of 3. They did 3 weeks in a row, this particular thing, and we were like the trail breakers, if you like. And if you hadn't spotted before, 52 Degrees North Travel is actually mine and myself's wife's travel company. So 52 Degrees North is actually the coordinates of Stratford upon Avon, although it sounds very northern and very cold. 52 Degrees North is the coordinates of that. Thank you very much, Pitki Chan. I hope I've said that right. So if there's any more questions, no one's actually, I don't think, answered the question yet on the handout. So I'll just before I finish, we'll just go through those really quick. So the questions were: what food did Matt have to eat that was rock hard? That was the first one, and that was bread. What do these challenges give me? And they gave me energy. What type of husky were they? And it was Alaskan Husky. What was the name of the first campsite? And it was the Tri-Nation camp. And what was the colour of the red anchor or brake? And it was red. And then there's one question left, which I'm going to let you fill that one in because it shouldn't be that difficult. So what did Freddie do to make the dogs upset or make them howl? So he howled. Sorry, I just gave you the answer. It's late. So yeah, the first person to tell me what that word is, like I say, it can be on chat. I'll stay on there just to verify everybody drops off. And if not, you can send me an email. So thank you very much for listening. Really appreciate it. Fantastic to hear so many people. Breathe. We got one. We got a SpaceX launch. Yeah, you're quite right. That's another hour yet, isn't it? I think it's 9:20. I think. I hope so. Anyway, but yeah, SpaceX launch. So breathe. Nikki Brooks. Nikki Brooks is our winner. So Nikki, I'll send you an email afterwards and send you something through the post. So Nikki Brooks. Well done, Nikki. I'm glad to hear you found it inspirational, Barbara, and get your own challenges underway. Plenty of time to book them now, or sorry, not book them, think about them at least, and get them going. So, it depends where you live, what time, I guess. Yeah, the SpaceX, yeah, you're quite right. They might not be in England. So thank you very much. If that's it, we'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you.